So, I thought it would be prudent that while we're still in the North Pole and I've had my meetings with Santa Claus and the elves, and I hope you got your gifts, because some of those gifts were from me. And it was the gift of knowledge. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about something we've talked about before. I may need to wet my lips a little bit. Let's have some snow. It's cold. This stuff is cold. Some people think it comes from Colombia. Okay, we need to talk about the end of the world, because it's going to connect to this planet and the nature of this planet, what I think the nature of this planet. And the end of the world is funny because there is always in play an end of the world scenario, an end of the world narrative. Now, it used to be, centuries ago, prophets would scream from the mountain, Revelation, I've been given a message, the world's going to end. And then as the centuries went down, people would still be screaming, it's the end of the world, right? The world's going to end as ordained by the divine power. And then there are prophets who say, on this day, the world will end. And I'm not going to run through all the scenarios, but what we know through historical evidence is that all of the prophecies that the world will end have not materialized, i.e., the world has not ended. So let me share with you a little bit about my approach to where I get my ideas from, because I'm not a scientist. But a lot of my ideas come from observation. And then some of my ideas come from deep research and analysis. And that's more complicated. That's like deep observation, and that comes through my shamanic training. But in general, I always apply, and I learned this early on, is that the early scientists, Newton, right? The early scientists, they observed nature, they observed reality, they observed a phenomenon, and then they created, an algorithm, a theory based on those observations or those repeat observations. And as science progressed, the scientists would duplicate or replicate that observation in a controlled lab. But now we've gotten to the point where if it's not done in a lab, it's just not true. And I don't agree with that. And not when it comes to my work. My work deals with explaining all kinds of exotic and esoteric things. So, getting back to the end of the world. Observation, right? Observation. Look around. Look behind me. See those snow and trees? See that? That means, and see me? That means that the world has not ended. That's observation. I don't need to take it to the lab and be a scientist and scientifically prove it. I don't need to do that. I can state by observation, the world is still here. Therefore, the world did not end. In all of the hundreds, thousands of prophecies that were guaranteed, that were divine from godly beings, that were seen by psychics, that were prophesied by science, that were prophesied by, military generals. None of that has ever materialized. In fact, as you see see, look at this. This is, this is a product of nature. Or it's good though. Snow is filtered water. This is proof that the world has not ended, and it's proof that, more importantly, nature is working just right. Observation, right? If nature was sick, if nature was not working right, and this is the middle of winter, there would be no snow. If nature was not working right, the snow would be all yellow, okay? And don't eat yellow snow. Snow has to be white or brown snow. If nature was not working or was having problems or was about to collapse, was on the verge of collapse. Now you see where I'm getting to. Because there are scientists and people who believe these scientists who are suggesting that the planet is in peril. In peril, like we're all going to perish, unless we do what we are told to do. But nature's working pretty good. Look in your own backyard. So then we get into, well, there are these extreme weather events, right? But that has not destroyed the world. Earthquakes have been around for centuries. Volcanoes, millennia. Volcanoes formed, volcanic eruption formed land masses, right? The shifting of tectonic plates formed our continents. The melting of glaciers moved continents, land masses that formed our planet. In all of those giant disruptions, in all of the natural catastrophe, scientifically measured, the world has not ended. We are still here. In fact, there's over 7 billion people here. That's not a feat that you can achieve in peril. Like if the world was going to end, there would be no people left because we'd all be dying off. Now, of course, I'm not saying that bad things don't happen. And I have an alternative theory as to why the extreme weather events are occurring. And that's because the deployment of climate weapons that are classified national secrets that cannot be disclosed, and the deployment of those weapons, or in some cases, a climate weapon can be deployed and another climate weapon can counter the effects of another one, and so you get like multiple effects, which is the basis of my book, World War C, or World War Climate. But that doesn't suggest the end of the world. That only exposes advanced weapons, space-based weapons, that we are not privy to, because I can't go into space to take pictures of them. But we can see the evidence of these climate weapons on our planet by earthquakes that are unusually large, by hurricanes that are unusually devastating, by storms and random tornadoes and heat waves, and by, wood fires that just burn houses and don't burn trees. Again, that's not the end of the world, A. B, the climate is now the threat. That the climate, the carbon, is another one of these prophecies, a scientific prophecy that if we don't all drive electric vehicles, the world, the oceans will rise. Think about this in the biblical terms. The oceans will rise, the skies will strike thunder and lightning, and the land will split apart. Now, I'm speaking a little bit in the biblical sense, because that's the suggestion, right? But that's the suggestion. In ancient times, we would have blamed the gods. And we would say the gods are going to destroy the world unless we change, right? The gods, the earth shakes, the sky is red, the sea is full of blood, there's a giant earthquake, the volcano splits open, there's a giant apparition in the sky. What do you do as an ancient, illiterate person? You say, oh my, blessed be the gods. We will behave. The gods are saying, behave. I am more powerful than you. I control the weather. I control thunder and lightning. I can split the earth. That's a godlike power. In ancient times, if I'm an illiterate person in ancient times, I will be on my knees and I will be praying. I would be apologizing. I would behave. It's a form of obedience. And if we understand, the history of the earth, and if we compare it to today, where there are godlike weapons, climate weapons, electromagnetic weapons, scalar weapons that can cause earthquakes, that can spark a volcano, that can multiply the effects of a hurricane, that can induce heat waves, that can spark fires. If we understand, see what I'm saying? Ancient times, gods are trying to they want to destroy us unless we behave. In modern times, we're seeing the same thing or similar, right? Similar things. Only now is technology, because we know that the gods were just advanced cultures with space-based weapons or climate technologies on board their ships. So today it's the same thing, but now we have the technology as human beings who were assisted by advanced cultures. And now those devices are scaring us. into obedience. All right, let's see if I can get more sun here. Obedience. What is it about? It's about obedience. It's not about the end of the world. Because we know historically that the world doesn't end. Historically, the world doesn't end. And the best prophets, divine beings, the smartest psychics have all said, the scientists have said, the world is going to end in all of these ways. Same thing with the nuclear power, right? Einstein says, I don't know about World War III, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. But he's a scientist because he feared of a nuclear war, which is an end of the world scenario. The nuclear war never manifested, and that started in the late 40s, after World War II. So there's World War II, and we're afraid it's a big world war, it'll never end. World War II ends in 1945 with the development of the atomic bomb. In the years that followed, there's now a nuclear threat. The nuclear threat morphed into an alien threat at some point, and that went on for a while. And now there was the space-based weapons, the missiles, right, from space, which was part of the Star Wars defense program, the Strategic Defense Initiative in the early 80s by Ronald Reagan, was because they feared that nuclear missiles could be launched from outer space, and it can hit anywhere on the planet. So that was in 83, SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. So there's always a threat. You understand, there's always a threat. If it's not like a threat of oil, gasoline shortage, there's an oil shortage. What are we going to do when an oil shortage? What are we going to do with the nuclear war? Then after that came the global cooling. This is in the late 80s, 90s. The global cooling. The Earth is going to freeze. We're all going to freeze to death because the Earth is cooling. That didn't work. That didn't even manifest. And then it went into global warming. This is now in the early 2005, 6. Global warming. Because the threat of the global cooling, that the world is going to freeze and we're all going to die. We're all going to freeze to death. And people were moving to warmer climates. The global cooling didn't manifest. So then there's the global warming. No, it's not the cooling, it's the warming. The global warming didn't manifest because the global warming, the scientists were saying, and their spokespeople were saying, that the icebergs are all going to melt, and the waters are going to rise, and it's going to flood all of the coasts. California will be flooded. New York will be flooded. There's going to be massive devastation from flooding. Continents will flood. That didn't manifest because that was supposed to that was in 2006. So that was prophesized by science. This is science. That was prophesized to happen in the next, between 2006 and 2011. That's it. It's over. Global warming. That didn't take effect. So now they said, well, could be cooling. It could be warming. We're not sure what it is because we haven't decided on what's the best way to scare everybody. Let's just call it climate change. And that way we can say whatever. If it cools, we covered it. If it warms, we covered it. Because we don't know what it is, because it's nothing. Okay? Let's just say, why don't you just say, life change? Everybody, do the right thing because your life will change. Oh my God, my life changed today. My life changed today. They're right. Like they're just making up these prophecies. And now it's based on science. Science says that there's too much carbon and it's going to cause massive destruction. It's going to cause massive shifts, and the icebergs are melting, and the polar bears have to stay in a hotel. And what I'm saying is, historically speaking, and we won't be able to get into the other stuff because I'm losing light. Hopefully you can still see me. Historically speaking, the world doesn't end. And my belief, based on history and observation, the world will never end. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. So whenever I see a global destruction narrative, everyone is in peril unless you obey us, I just don't believe it. That's not to say I'm careless, right? That's not to say I'm careless and ignorant. It's just say it's just not going to end. And they're a bunch of prophets and soothsayers. They're using science to convince you. In the old times, the psychics and the soothsayers, they would use, what would they use? Scripture. Scripture says, in these days, you will see a dark sky. The sea will turn red, and then we will all die. It's the same thing. We're not all going to die, folks. We're not all going to die. It's not the end of the world. So let's just keep it in perspective. My point is, keep it in perspective. Don't be bullied into believing this nonsense. Okay? But as a society, let's improve. Let's do better. Let's, protect the environment. Let's spend time in nature. Let's eat organic food. Right? That's, But if you don't do that, the world's still going to be here. That's just I have 40,000 years of history. The modern human is 40,000 years. 40,000 years of history. I got evidence. I've got the evidence. It's pretty good. It's called historical evidence and observation.